Hello guys, so welcome to another edition of the Blue Tech Empire main stack tutorials. So here is our second video on the main stack. We are going to be learning the variable types, or not, let's just say in this video particular we are going to be learning declaring variables, while in the next video we are going to be learning variable types. So you're going to be learning declaring variables, the global variables, local variables, and we're also going to be learning how to be using the const keyword, that's const, and the let keyword, the difference between the let and the var keyword. So I'm going to show you brief examples on that. So let's get started to the video. In the last video, we looked at functions, how to declare functions that take parameters, how to declare functions that don't take parameters, and how to declare functions that return values. So we had some basic introduction, and now we are going to look at local and global variable. Now, any variable declared outside of a function, like on the main script, is called a global variable. For example, let's say my global one is equals to let's say 30. Now let's have another variable called my global 2 is equals to remember, you can use any name. You can use my global 1 or my global 2. I'm just using my global you can use any name. You can even use cats equals to 20. So these are all global variables. Why? Because they are not they are declared outside on the script. They aren't declared in a function, they are declared on the script, so we call them global variables. So unlike local variables, so for example, I can display now a variable. Each time I declare a variable, you see me giving it a name. This name can be any valid identifier. Now it's called an identifier or a variable name, or some people just call it variable. So an identifier there are some rules for writing identifier. Even sometimes you saw me create something like this, maybe func1 equal func1 like this. Now this func1 is also an identifier, same like cats, my stuff, and the stuff. Now there are rules for writing identifiers. For example, an identifier cannot have a space, so I'm going to be showing you here. Let's say var test equals to 20. Now these are all global variables. This is a global variable, this is a global function, these are global variables. Now but I want to talk more about identifiers. Now identifiers can, for example, this test identifier can be made up of lowercase or uppercase. Now identifiers are case sensitive, which means test is different from test. I'm going to show you. For example, let's have three different variables. Test is different from test, maybe test, which is different from test. You see, now these are all three different identifiers. Test different from all this stuff. So yeah, three different identifiers. Now if you print each of them, you're going to have I'm going to show you console.log. With the console.log, you can use comma to print different variables if you want. Test, and I even have test. Now you see these are going to give me different values, as you can see, 20, 22, 21. Okay, now if I try to repeat them, I just want to show you those are different variables. You're going to see a repetition somewhere. On code test is not defined. All right, so I'm going to this one is not defined. Let's see which one is not defined. This is not defined. So you're gonna see 21, 22. All right, so you see this, I redeclared this variable here. This replaced this, so that's why we have 21, 22. But I just want to show you variables are actually case sensitive. So this is a different identifier. Identifiers are case sensitive. This is a different identifier, this is a different one, and this is a different one. So but most times I always use lowercase, and we use capital letters mainly when we want to declare constants. I'm going to be showing you that later. Each time, by conversion, each time you want to declare a constant, we use capital letters. So each time you see capital letters in your code, or some code you're reviewing, or some code online, know that variable might have been, or most probably was declared as a constant. I'm going to show you the constant keyword later on. But for now, I just want to show you that these are all different identifiers and they are case sensitive. Now let's continue with this. Now in this case, I want to show you an identifier cannot start with a number, for example 4, or whatever number. It can't start with a number. For example, you cannot say first test. Because of this number, this identifier is wrong. You can try it and you're going to see if you the ID already tells us is wrong. So now, but a number can be in the middle, or test one first or something like that. So a number can be in the middle or a number can be at the end. Anywhere you put a number, it can be even here, and you can have multiple numbers everywhere. Once the first letter is a digit, a character, a letter, then a number can follow through. Now, other valid characters that can be in an identifier is underscore. For example, like this, we mostly use this called snake casing when you use um, underscore to separate words, or you can use camel casing like this to separate words. So you can either use snake casing or camel casing. So sometimes I use test camel casing for methods, while snake casing for variable names. So next, you can have special words. For example, you cannot have a space within an identifier. So this is wrong. You prefer you can write it like this, or you can write it like this, or you can write it like this. You can write it like this, but you can't write it with a space. It's wrong. A valid identifier cannot have a space between. Next, you cannot have special characters like all these stuffs like this. You can have the only special character allowed is a dollar sign. That's why you see jQuery uses a dollar sign. You're familiar with jQuery. You cannot have something like hash. You cannot have plus, of course, because plus is a sign. You cannot have minus because all those stuff. So you can't have these, and most special characters cannot be in a variable name apart from the dollar sign. And usually when you use the dollar sign, it's always good to put it in front, not in the middle. So like, and it can, a variable name can also start with an underscore, and you can have underscores anywhere too. You can have underscores even at the end. Most times when you're dealing with objects, private variables usually start with an underscore, and variables that should be absolutely private has two underscore, or that are private by, that's built-in private variables usually have two underscore. So those are the few rules you need to know about. An identifier cannot start with a number, an identifier cannot have a space within, an identifier cannot have a special character, but an identifier can have a number within, it can have an underscore, it can start with an underscore, end with an underscore, can have an underscore inside, and it can also start with a dollar sign. So those are the few rules for declaring identifiers. So most times as I'll be using identifiers, I want you to know you can use any identifier for as a variable name, but you must follow the rules of identifiers. So for example, these are global variables. So let's see. Now, you can print a global variable once you declare it anywhere. For example, I can say console.log and I can print it outside here. Let me print cats, for example, and see the output. So you can see printing cats gives me 20. Now you can also use a global variable within a function. So yeah, I'm going to use console.log, and I'm going to use let's say my global one. So let's see. Now remember, this will not be displayed because I've not yet called the function. So I need to call the function, and calling the function is simple. I just need to say func1, and let's see, using it now is clean. All right, so we have 30. So as you can see, when you declare a global variable, you can use it within a function. Now, if you declare that same global variable within the function, then you can no longer use the global variable with its name again. For example, if within that function I create a global variable called my global one equals to 200 or 20.5, for example, if I write console dot log and I started with the text. Let's say in func1. Remember, you can print multiple stuffs with console.log my global one. So now the ID already shows us, if you point this my global one, you see this one is not highlighted, which shows it only this is the only recognize my global one. So we say this my global one has hidden the local my global one have hidden the global my global one. So this variable within a function is known as a local variable. Local variable. Remember, these are comments. Comments are comments that you can use a single line comment 2/. That's when you want to comment out just something on a single line, so it's valid till the end of the line. JavaScript will ignore everything you comment out. Or you can have multiple line comment. You start with a / and an asterisk, and you end with an asterisk and a /. So these are multiple line comments. If you want to comment out a vast amount of stuff like this, you can use multi-line comment like this. So we also use it for documentation. I'm going to show you that later. So like if you want to document a function, you can come and write like this. I'm going to show you that later. Well, it's not. I'm going to show you that later. So in this case now, as you can see, we have a local variable with the same name as a global variable. So what it does is that it blocked that global variable. Remember, if we did it like this 3, in this case now, this my global one points to the outside global variable. So you can see if we write in function, if we come and maybe declare, say for example, local variable and we put my global 3, you see when we call this function, let's terminate it. So let's only call this function, so we'll see what is printed inside. You see we have 20.5 and 30. So as you can see, this my global one still points to the global variable, while this my global 3 is actually local. So normally I can write my local instead of my global. My local one. So my local one, my local my local so I can use now my local. Let's see. Okay, so let's say now instead of giving it my global, we give it my name my local, an identifier my local. So in this case, as you can see, prints the local variable while this prints the global variable. Now like I said, if you have actually hidden the global variable by creating the same name as this, which in this case now you have hidden the global variable. So this prints out, but remember, outside the function, the global variable still has its for example, let's say console.log, let's say outside function, outside, let's see the value of this, my global one. So let's see the value. So inside we have 20.5, outside we have 30. So what shows you is that what you learn from that is func1 did not actually change the value of my global one. It only hid it. So this my global one is only declared within this function. So when you use the var keyword to declare a variable within a function, that variable has what we call a function scope. It means it's only valid within that function. It's not valid outside the function. I'm going to show you that. For example, you cannot use a variable which you only declared within a function. That's why you see this my global one is only valid inside this function, while this other my global is outside. And secondly, if you have something like var my local equals to 100, and you come and, for example, let's add my local, let's see what we have. Okay, so we have 20.5 and 10. That's on line 21 or on line 18. On line 18. So you see here we have 20.5 and 10. Now this my local variable is only valid in here. This my global variable is only valid in here. This my global variable hides the actual global variable. Why? Because it has the same name as the global variable. Now you may be asking, in case we want to access, in case we hide a global variable, let's say cats. So for example, let's not go, let's say cats for example, and let's print out cats. Let's see what will happen, because if we use global local, it sounds like we are already saying what it is. So here we have 30 and 100. As you can see, outside we have, in this case, let me do this, um, let me use cats so you see clearly. Oh yeah, all right. Okay, we have in function cats is 20.5, outside is 20. So as you can see, what happens is this actually redeclare the variable called cats, therefore hiding the global variable called cats. So now this cats here becomes a local variable that can only be used within the function. That's why cat here is 20. In the function, cat is 20.5 because this is the only, it can only see the local variable. It can't access this global cats again because this one has hidden it. So but outside here, since we are out of the function now, this line 21 sees but this cat, while inside here line 17 sees this cat. So this cat here is a local variable, while this cat here is a global variable, and they are totally different. This one does not replace this one except you assign the global variable. So in this case, you see we did not create a new variable, we just assigned the value 20.5 to the global cat. So in this case, we are going to have 20.5 all through. As you can see, 20.5, 20.5 here. Why? Because um, let's see. Okay, so all right, so let's see. So we have this because instead of redeclaring a variable, we just assign 20.5 to the global variable, which will be reflected here too. We did not create a new variable. In this case, we created a new variable, thereby hiding this one. Now, how will we get the outside variable? We can use, what happens is when you create a variable on the global scope, it's stored in the Windows object as a property. When we learn object, you're going to understand what I mean. It's going to be saved. Is going to the browser is going to create an object or a property of the Windows object called cats and assign the value 20 to it. So if you write window.cats, let's say we use console.log and we are in function, let's try to see in function. Let's put an asterisk here so we are going to know it's something special. So in function, if we want to use the external variable that have been hidden, we can use this window.cats, and as you can see, uh, here we have 20 both outside and in function asterisk. Why? Because this window.cat now refers, as you can see, to the outside variable. You can see the ID even shows us windows.cat is referring to the global cats, not this one inside. You can also use globals, global this. Yes, you can also use global this.cats. You can use any of them. It actually, we're going to learn about objects later, but just know you can actually use that and you have the same stuff. Yeah, so global this.cat still points to the variable which have been hidden. Now if you do not hide, for example, if you use cat2, if you do not hide the variable, then you can use normal cats. You don't need to use global this. Why? Because the cat here can only refer to the global variable, because you did not hide it here. For example, here we declare cat2, not cat. So for example, so just understand that within a function you can use a global variable, But if you hide the global variable by declaring a new variable with the same name as the global variable, then you can no longer access that global variable. You might either have to use windows.that global variable or global this.that global variable. Now let's see. Now we declared a variable called cat2, or let's say local1 inside the function. Let's see if we can use it outside. Can we use local1? Let's try it. Local1. Let's try it. So no, they said local1 is not defined. What does that mean? Now, variables declared inside functions are function scoped. They are only when you use a var keyword to declare a variable, or even the let keyword, which we are going to see in the future, it's function scope, which means it's only valid within that function. Outside the function, it's not recognized. So when you say local1, the browser checks if there's any global variable called local1, because this is not in a function. So variables declared in functions can only be used within that function. If we have another function called fun2 and we declare another variable called local2 called for example 30, you cannot use local2 outside that function. It's going to be wrong. So as you can see, we still have the same problem. Now what do we do now? In this case, there's nothing to do. If you need a variable inside a function, then you can call a function and tell it to return that value. For example, return local2, and when you call the function, for example, you can say var my local equals to call the function fun2. Since we in the last video we learned about functions that return values, so fun2, we call fun2, you see it returns a number, as you can see from here. So fun2 will execute and return local. Then now we can display using console. You can display that my local using you can display it my local now. So let's see, we can now display so we have they said that console is not defined. Sorry, console.log. So as you can see, this helps us to detect errors. If we aren't using the console, the browser quietly ignores the error, as you can see, but it's displayed in the console. So usually when you're designing a during design stage, it's always good to have the console open. It will really help you for debugging. So in this case now, let's check what will be printed out. So we see my local is 30.5, and you can see why. Is because we call the function returned that value to us. So if you need to access a value within a function, make sure the function returns that value. So what to do is that you call the function and you assign that value returned by the function to any variable, and you can now use that variable. So we call the function returned in local2, which in this case is 30.5. We assigned that local2 or whatever was returned by the function to our own variable called my local1, which you can give it any name, my global, my local, whatever, and then we now can print that value out. All right, so that's actually the difference between global and local variable. For simplicity, a global variable is declared out of every function, while local variables are declared in functions. If you want to get a local variable within a function, then that function should return that local variable. You saw it in the example in our previous video where we wrote a function that does multiplication. For example, let's say from a function called mod. It takes two parameters. It calls them a and b, and then it returns let's call it multiply so that it corrects our English. Okay, now we can say result var result equals to a times b. Now we can just return result. Now after returning result, if we call that function now, for example here, we can call the function called multiply, and we give it multiply 5 by 10, and we will get the result and assign it to my local, and we print my local You see my local now is going to give us, I think, 50. So that's an example of how you can call variables. So I just wanted to show you. So now let's move forward. Let's move forward. So you have understood the idea of local and global variables. Okay, now so these local variables, these global variables can also be used in any script. For example, if you have multiple scripts attached to the HTML here, you can use global variables in any of those scripts. But I'll simulate that since we haven't started using script now. I'll simulate that by creating another script, and then I'm going to display that local variable. For example, let's say console.log. I'm using one of them, my global tool. You see it's showing. So if it was a different script in a different file, for example, it's still possible. Any global variable can be used in any script. So as you can see from here, you see 40 that's been printed out. And remember, this is in a different script. So a global variable declared with a var keyword can be used in any script. It doesn't work with the let keyword. For example, if you let's see let cards, and if you yes let's use let for, or let's use global 2. Let's use let for global 2. I just want to be sure if it works or it doesn't work. Okay, it works too. It works too for the let keyword. All right, so it's, let's see, let, I think is when it's strict mode that it doesn't work or something. All right, but we use, even for the let keyword, once a variable is global, you can use it in any script. So let's just note that too. I noted that too. So I used to think it's only the var keyword. So as you can see, all right, so now let's move forward. All right, so let's move to using the const keyword. So I'm going to wipe all this stuff here. Going to wipe all this stuff here, and let's see, let's go to using the const keyword. So now let's assume we have two variables. Let's give var pi. Now, like I told you, const, when you're declaring a constant, it's always good to use capital letter by convention. That's what most programmers have been doing for years now, so it's just good to follow through. So we use capital letter pi equals to 3.14, and let's say we have another constant called var max width, maybe the max width of the browser or whatever, is equal to let's say 500 or pixels. Let's just say 500 since we cannot add pixel. So let's say we need a function to calculate pi radius and pi radius, the radius of a circle, for example. So we can call that the get radius function get radius, and let's see, you pass the radius, for example, reduce, and the function will calculate area and return the radius, or just print out the radius. So we'll say var result equal to let's say pi times radius squared. We can say pi times, remember this pi is our global variable, times we can say radius squared, which can be radius. Now JavaScript also has this same stuff as Python. You can use double asterisk as raised to the power 2, and you can now print the result console.log. You can say area circle width. So circle with radius has area this. So let's see, let's call the function get radius and give it, let's say, pass it 45 as variable. Let's call it again get radius and pass it 40 and see what it does. So let's see here, circle with radius. Yeah, so here are the different radius, and let's say now let's use, instead of using radius raised to the power 2, let's use the normal stuff for JavaScript. You can use what we call math.power. So we have radius and the power is 2. So that's pi times radius squared Let's see now the output. So here we go. So now here is a function that actually calculates the radius. Now the problem is with this function is, let's say by mistakenly the user mistakenly changed pi to 300, just say by mistake. Let's say this is a library, and other codes, other functions or scripts are using this same pi, and by mistake a user mistakenly changes it in a script. We are going to have a wrong value for pi radius squared. So that's where the aspect of constant comes in. If you want a value never to change after it has been assigned this initial value, you can use a constant to declare it. We haven't used this variable yet, but I'm just going to declare it with a constant. So in this case, if we try to change the value, let's see what happens. It tells us concord invalid assignment constant. Okay, so you can't change the value of a constant. So constant keyword is, you use a constant when you want to declare a variable that should never be changed in the code. So these two variables can never be changed in the code. If we try to change max width to maybe 600 somehow, it tells you can't change the variable. So you can't assign because it's a constant. So that's the difference between a constant and a var keyword. Constants that are follow the same rule as global and local variables, but the aspect about constants is you can't use them, you can assign to them after they have been declared. You can use them in a function, but you can never assign to them after they have been declared. So that's the aspect that you need to know about constant. So now we're going to look at the let keyword. But before I do that, I want you to note the constants are by convention, the constants are declared with capital letter. It's always good to use capital letter for constants. And take note, a constant, the value of a constant cannot be changed. So if you have a specific value which you like to be constant, most times you have a couple of values which you want them to remain the same. What happens is you declare that variable as a constant. In the future, we are going to be seeing a lot of this stuff, so I'm just giving you basic introduction to some of this stuff. So let's look at an example of a function that actually gets the discount of from, say, let's say you are running a business and you have a discount period, and you want to write a function to detect or determine the discount for a particular price. So let's write that function. All right, so here we have a function called getDistant, and as you can see, the function collects, we call the function 3 times here. The function has one parameter, it calls with an identifier, it gives that parameter the name amount, which is a valid identifier. Now we also create another variable called amount with an underscore, which is a valid identifier, and we are assigning the amount value. Why we are doing that is because we will need to change the value of amount several times. So the first thing, we use an if else statement. The if else statement works by first checking its conditional statement, which can be true or false. In this case, it checks if amount is greater than or equals to 20,000, is greater than 20,000. If that's the case, then we can use greater than or equals to 20,000. If that's the case, what we do is these two lines, line 18 and 19, are going to be printed out, and execution is going to continue at the end of the if else statement, which is here. So execution is going to continue here. So only one of these blocks, this block or this block, can be executed at a given time. No two of them will be executed. If this is true, this block will be executed. If that is not true, the else part will be executed, and the else part has an if statement which checks again if the amount is greater than 10,000. In that case, this block will be executed. If not, then the final else part is going to be executed. That's if this is false and this is false, this part will be executed. So you can continue if else, if else, if else until we have a final else block. But if there's no else block here, then nothing will be executed. Execution, if this is false and this is false, execution will just continue from here. But if you want a fallback option which should be executed if none of these statements are true, then you have a final else statement which has the stuff. So in this case, what we do is that we actually calculate a discount, which is the original amount minus 20% times the amount. Now notice we are creating a new variable. Now because a variables declared with the var keyword are scoped globally, which means within the whole function body. It means changing the value here creating a new variable called amount will affect this amount here. Creating a new variable called amount will affect it, but it's not going to affect any amount outside. For example, if we had an amount here, amount equals to 4,000, for example, this amount here does not affect this amount here because its scope is within the function. It has function scope. It has a function scope. Remember from the previous discussion we had, it has a function scope. So this amount is only valid within this function, while this amount is outside the function. So I want you to take note of that. So if you have, for example, you write console dot global amount. So as you can see, this amount is only referring to this amount up here, 4,000. That's the global amount. So just wanted to take note. Now, this amount is function scope, which means the one here is the same as the one here, the same as the one here. Most times when you're writing programming language, a code, you don't want that kind of bugosity. For example, we have the effect by saying, for example, it indicates it indicates the use amount to pay to the user, and then it said instead of, which is supposed to be the original amount. Now, the original amount, for example, is the initial amount. In this case, let's say we pass 25,000, so it will be 25,000. But because we created a new variable called amount, the discount is going to be the new discount calculated here will be replaced with the original amount. So this instead of, which is supposed to print the original amount, will be printing the new discount. Let's see that from the output so that we understand what I'm saying. So here is global amount. It's always 4,000. It does not have anything to do with the function. All right. So global amount is 4,000. Now we see pay 20,000 instead of 20,000. Why? Because the discount we calculated replaced the original amount value in this case. So if we need to have a correct if we want to correct our code, we need to change this to let. Now let has a block scope. It means let is only variables declared with let are only valid within that block. You know that, like from the previous video, I explained to you a block is anything within the curly braces. For example, anything within two curly braces. Anywhere in your code, if you have a block like this, you can declare a let function. You can declare a let variable like this, and it's only valid within that block. So this var1, as you can see, is only valid here, while this var1 is outside. Now, anywhere you have a block, a let variable is only valid within that block. Outside the block, it's not defined. So if you say console.log and you say var1, for example, you're gonna have a problem. On code can't accelerate var1. That's because this var1 is only valid within this block. It cannot even be seen outside this block. So that's different between let and the var keyword. The let keyword is block scoped, while the var keyword is function scope or global scope. So now let's change these vars to let and see the effect. So we have changed all the var to let. Let's see the effect on the console. So you can see now we have 20, 25, 135, 15, 13.5, sorry, and everything now prints normally. Our original value shows and everything prints normally. All right, so there is the difference between the let and the var keyword. The let is only block scope, while the var is global scope. We are going to see more of that in the next video. So have a nice time and see you in the next video.